jet coding. So into this, I want to talk about objects, right? So the object property, the object method, and we'll touch on the prototype, right? So to declare an object, we just use the const keyword, then give it an object name. Then we open this bracket to mark the beginning and the end of the object. Now we want to add a property in the object, right? So we want to add name. We use the colon to separate them, right? So maybe we want to add a name, George, then we add maybe the age. So let's say age is equal to let's say 23. Then we have maybe we have something gender, right? Maybe male. Then finally is married. Maybe we set it to false, right? Okay, so now this is an object, right? So we've declared an object with some properties inside, right? So to console log some of the properties to see whether they are inside, right? We can just do, right, console.log. We use the objects, so objects dots, right? Then we call the name to see what we'll get. We get George, right? Then we can also console.log the objects dots, the age. Then so you see the trend that I'm trying to project, right? So but using the dot notation, we can just have the properties that we can access the properties that are in the object, right? So similarly, when we want to insert maybe a property that is not inside the object, right? We can just use the accessing, how we access elements in the array. So we can just do the objects, then we open a bracket. So assuming we pass in maybe so school. So we pass in school. Okay, let's do something like degree, right? Then assuming if you want to, we want to access this from the objects, right? So let's do something like objects, let's say George, right? Then so when we copy this, we paste it here, then we paste it here, right? Since this degree is not inside the George objects, we would want to reassign it. So we want to say something like MSc, right? Now, when we call the George objects, we'll see that we had initially in the objects, we didn't have anything called the degree, but now doing some reassignment with the open brackets, right? We can just do an assignment. So if it checks and George, the degree is not inside, right? It will just use the degree as a key, then assign this as a value. So this is another way to access. So assuming we want to now access George, the degree using this, so we will have masters, assuming we console.log. Now this sets it initially. So let's console, right? Let's console.log. Then we pass it here. We'll see that we have the MSc, right? So this is one way to go about it. Now, assuming we want to pass a method inside this object, right? So what we do is that we can just do what we call maybe speak, right? Then we call this function, right? That doesn't take anything. So it will just console.log, right? Console.log, maybe, so inside this object, assuming we want to do some clever stuff here, right? We want to just do something like, now to access anything, to access a variable inside this object in this function, of which we call it a method, right? We can use what we call the this keyword. So we can just do this dot name, right? This dot name is, let's say, now speaking, right? So this is a clever way to do it. So assuming we don't want this. So do I have any? So I have to put something here. Okay. So I think that's all. Okay. So now, assuming I want to make George say something, right? So I can just do George console.log George, then I'll do the speak. Since it's a function, I'll call it, and I will see it as console.log George is now speaking. So the this, right, is a reference to this object, right? So it points to the object. So now we cannot just use the name here because this name is not a property in the object. So since we are in the object and we want to access properties in the object, we have to use a reference that points an instance of that object, right? Or a reference that points to an instance of that object. And that is the this keyword, right? We just use this dot, then we call the name. Similarly, if we want to maybe call another method, maybe 18, right? 18, we can just put this and call 18, right? 18. Then we give it a function, right? Then assuming, okay, so let's be clever and be like, so let's say details, right? So detail, we want to print out the details of John when we call the method detail. So we just use a function, right? It doesn't take any arguments, any parameter. Then we are just going to console.log. We are just going to console.log. We are using the template literals as we said earlier on. So we are going to say maybe, right, my name is, then we use this $, open brackets, then we call this dot name, right? My name is this dot name. Then maybe I am, then we do this again. We do this dot, let's say age, right? Then comma, then we use, assuming again. So let's do so let's do a full stop. Then we do let's say married, then we set it to, right, this, then we call this dot, then we call the, right, is married. So assuming we want to just do this, right, then finally let's do my degree, right, is, then we call this dot degree, right, degree, right? So assuming we want to just print the details of George, right? We can just use this method, this one method, to get all the details of George. So I'm just going to copy this, right, paste it here, and call the detail on it, right? It's a function. So we'll see that my name is George, I am 23, maybe I would want to 23, maybe years old, right? Then we see it here. So my name is George. I'm 23 years old. Where did I put it? Sorry. Sorry, George. So years old. All right. So my name is George. I'm 23 years old. So it's undefined. So did I make a mistake? It's married.
Married, yeah. Capital M.
Yeah. Yeah,
Capital.
okay. So yeah. Let me change it here. Okay. So am I married? False. My degree is MSc. So this is a way, right, to go about objects, right? So now this is one way. This is one aspect, right, to create an object and make use of the properties that are in the object, and as well as the function. Now let me show you another way to create a function. Now, just the fact that we call the objects as though it was a property. We can just use maybe another way to write this object is just to call it as it was. So we can just use walk, right? Walk, and just do this, right? So walk, then we just call it like this. We can just do it straight away like this. It will just work. So we can just console.log template string. Then let's do this. Then let's call this dots, right? Name is now, let's say, working in the hood, right? So something like this. Now, when I copy this, when I copy this and I paste it down here and I change this, right, to work. Now we'll see that we have George is working in the neighborhood. You see, it is the same thing. So you can just write the method in the objects like this or like this, right? Yeah. So now the disk, one thing that I want to point out is that now the disk keyword, right? When you use the disk keyword in the method, right? It points, right? The disk keyword in the object points to a reference to the object that called it, right? So when you're using the disk keyword in the objects, it is just a reference to the object that called it. So when you call the disk keyword, it is just calling the object, right? This object, and it will just check the properties inside if we have it. Now, there is another way that will make this keyword point to the window object. So in JavaScript, we have what we call the window object, and we have the actual object, right? The object that we declare. So assuming inside this function, right, we call another function, right? So let's say let me have a clever way to write it. So okay, let's use this set timer, right? We have something called set timer, right? Set timeout in JavaScript, right? So you can just use the function keyword, and we can just do something like this. Then we pass 1 second here. Then let's console.log the disk keyword, right? Let's console.log the disk keyword. Now I want you to see the difference between. So let's console.log. So this, comma, this, right? So you will see that we have an error here, right? We have an error. We have an, okay. So, okay. Now we don't, you see this object, now it is here. Now you see that this object, it is pointing to the window object, right? So the document object, that is what this, so when you call a function, when you call a standalone function in JavaScript and you pass in the this keyword, right? It will point this reference to this object. When we call a standalone function in an object, right? When you console.log this keyword inside the function, this function points to the window objects rather than the object that called it, right? So these are the difference. This is the difference that you're supposed to note, right? When you call a standalone function inside an object, right? When you console.log this keyword, right, it will point to the window object rather than the object that called it. So guys, I think with this tutorial, when you go over it and you try to wrap your head around it, it will be very clear to you. So I think see you in the next tutorial.